Hey guys, welcome to the first video in a series I call Extreme Makeover Code Edition. The purpose of this series is to teach you how to create efficient, reusable code that is easy to both read and implement. For our first topic today, we will be discussing API GET requests. I will explain how you can utilize higher order functions, objects, and object methods to create a function that calls a dynamically generated query string. Before we begin, I would first like to explain how the application I am using works. I have a couple different endpoints that I'm using to get information. The first is an autocomplete. It takes a string that is uncompleted, like ABBL, and provides me with a series of completed strings, like apple. I then put it into the state, and it sits right here. The second API endpoint that I use is a search recipes endpoint. Its job is to take the information that I put inside of the ingredients state and use it to search for ingredients that are going to be displayed here. The final API endpoint that I use is a recipe search by ID. This will allow me to display information about each recipe that I click on. So as we can see here, I can display dried apples. And dried apples will appear right here. Now that we have completed our tour of the website for now, it's time to take a look at the code to see exactly where we can improve things. As you can see, I have taken the API calls from their respective components and put them all into one area. So up here, we see the call for the autocomplete, then the call for the recipe search, and then the call for the specific recipe itself. From there, we can recognize what we're repeating. So right now, we are repeating a lot of code. For example, we're always using axios. We all have the exact same base URL, and we have the exact same headers. I took the liberty of completing all of this just to make sure that everything worked correctly, so you could see it all in action. So what I'm going to do now is kind of explain my reasoning behind why I went with this particular model. So the very first thing you're going to notice is that it takes two parameters. The first one is a path that's responsible for going past the base link and telling the endpoint exactly where to go. The second is a config object. That config object is used in a lot of different areas. From there, we have the config. The config is then broken down into bits and pieces. Very first thing we need to do is get our hands on those keys. So we use Object.keys to get an array of keys that we are going to map over. For each key, we are going to take that key and add a equal sign. From there, we will also add the value for that key according to the config object. And then finally, we are going to join it all together with an ampersand right there. We will then add it to the base link and the path to get the URL right here. Now, some of the great things that you can do with this particular model specifically is that if you found out that there was other options for each API, like let's say it allowed you to rank something so that you could like change the order depending on like a number of different variables, you would be able to do that relatively easily. All you need to do is add another key value pair to the object that we put into the particular function here. Overall, it's incredibly versatile. Let's say I wanted to give the user a chance to change the number of responses that you would get. It would be much easier to do that rather than dealing with a really nasty query string like you're seeing here. It would just take a little bit more time to put everything together. In addition to everything else, it is also a wise decision to add a default to the config, specifically in the case of our queryless section here. Because I don't actually ask anything of the API beyond give me just the information about the particular recipe, I would not need to include a config object at all. So this is very useful for that. Now we can go ahead and implement all of the different areas here. So we have recipe. first thing we're going to want to do is import our API from our utils. And then we're going to go down and utilize it. So because we don't actually have any other parameters, just the path, we can just enter it in here and save it. And then go into our section here, search, add, and it still gives us all that information. It would have thrown us an error otherwise because the object would have been undefined and it wouldn't have worked. So by including an empty object, we have increased the elasticity of our function. Moving on, we can now implement this into other areas. So the other spot was our search. We go down to here and we type in const data is equal to await. Still important to remember that, API. And then add our pathway. Now we can put that right there as our first argument. And then the second argument, simply the query. So we are going to say query equal to this.state.search fields, because that is where I got the information in the first place. And now we're also going to add a number of 5. That is just how many options the API is going to give us later down the road. So we put this all together. We will save. Go back to here. Let's go back to fridge stock and A. And boom. Everything is still here. Everything is still functional. And now we have a much higher elasticity when it comes to our function calls. As a special thank you for watching this video, I have also included a quick code pen that helps further explain the concepts that I was talking about today and displays an example of the query string generator below. If you have any other ideas for different functions that you feel could use a little bit of a tune-up, you can just message or comment on this video and I can definitely take a look and maybe you'll make it into the next one. Anyway, thank you very much and have a great day.